they were better than this as a team in the Al Horford, Joe Johnson era, but those guys are not Trae Young.
Welcome to the Saturday Slam and Jam. I'm your host, Andrew Select. Go to theathletic.com/NBA show and get The Athletic for a discounted rate. Al, we're heading into just real basketball. There's no more trades. The buyout season is pretty much over, and there's a pretty nice playoff/play-in/tank races going on in the league, and it's pretty great from a night-to-night basis. But tell us what happened in the NBA this week.
Well, Andrew, it all started last Friday night with the real All-Star game, Kings-Clippers. The obvious choice for game of the year pushed the limits of what we thought was possible in a basketball game. The final score, Kings 176, Clippers 175, took 2 overtimes to achieve and was the second highest scoring game in NBA history. Andrew, just imagine if we could bring old Jimmy Naismith back for one day to watch that game. What a treat that would be for him. Just don't explain anything to him. Just sit him in the stands and let him see the final form of his invention, the Charizard of basketball. Malik Monk scored a career-high 45 points. Kawhi had 44. Fox had 42. The Kings came back from 14 late in the fourth, then came back from 6 in the first overtime, and finally came back from 6 again in the second overtime. The Kings currently have the most efficient offense in NBA history and may have their eyes on the 2 seed because they are now only 2 games back of the Memphis Grizzlies. On Saturday, we followed up the Kings-Clippers epic with a playoff-worthy show between Boston and Philly. The game was back and forth all night, with the Celtics coming back from 15 in the fourth, while Philly came back from 8 down with 5 minutes left in the game. In the final moments, with the score tied at 107, Jason Tatum hit the game-winning 3 from the top of the key with 1.3 seconds left. The ball was then inbounded to Joel Embiid, who launched a one-handed prayer from the opposite three-point line that actually went in, but was a split second late. The Celtics got the win, which was needed because there is a team hot on their tail. On Sunday, we traveled to the City of Roses, Portland, Oregon. Damian Lillard, who was already having a career year, added yet another highlight with a 71-point performance against the Houston Rockets. It is the second 71-point game of the season following Donovan Mitchell's game against the Bulls. Dame hit 13 threes, a franchise record, while also hitting all 14 of his free throws. Unfortunately for Portland, it was the lone highlight as of late because the Blazers have lost 4 of their last 5, dropping to 29-33, 12th in the West. And up next, a 6-game road trip featuring 6 games in 10 days. Whew. On Monday, Andrew, we got to talk about the New York Knicks, who have won 7 games in a row. None more impressive than the 109-94 victory over the Boston Celtics on Monday night. Now, we've had some fun Knicks teams, Andrew, but this one might have some juice. Since Tibbs mercifully switched up his rotation on December 4th, the Knicks are 27-14, with the 3rd-ranked offense and the 7th-ranked defense. Ooh. Newest addition, Josh Hart, is fitting like a glove in Tibbs' rotation, currently shooting 62% from the field and 60% from 3. Mitchell Robinson is back from his fractured thumb. The Knicks are hot, Andrew, and now sit only a game and a half back from home court in the playoffs. On Tuesday, now one of the side effects of the Knicks beating Boston is that it made room for the Bucks to take over the top spot in the East. The Bucks are currently in the midst of a 16-game winning streak. And on Tuesday, the next victim was the Brooklyn Nets. Giannis went for 33-15 in the win, and the Bucks moved to 45-17 by the end of the week. For the Nets, meanwhile, there was some interest to see what this team would look like. They've struggled as of late. They are 2-6 since the deadline trades, including losers of 4 straight. In those 4 losses, the Nets have had losses by 44 to the Bulls and 24 to the Knicks. They've fallen to 34-28, now only a game and a half above the dangerous play-in zone. And on Wednesday, one of the reasons Brooklyn is in their current predicament made his debut with his new team. Kevin Durant made his presence known, shooting 10-15 from the field for 23 points. The Suns got the 105-91 win over the Charlotte Hornets, who had been playing well. Did you know the Hornets had they won 5 games in a row, Andrew, coming into the Suns game? Wow. Unfortunately, in that last win, the 5th win, LaMelo Ball fractured his ankle, which means he's going to miss the rest of the season. Up next for the Suns is the Mavs on ABC Sunday, featuring a reunion between the 2 guys who gave Nets all those memories over the last couple years. And one of those guys played on Thursday in an important win for the new look Mavs. The Mavs, with Luka and Kyrie, had lost 5 of 6 coming into Thursday night. Their opponent, the Philadelphia 76ers. The Mavs were up by more than 20 with only 2 minutes left in the third quarter, but somehow, some way, they almost gave it all away within a matter of minutes. By the 9-minute mark of the fourth quarter, the lead had shrunk to 4. Now, following their loss to the Lakers, where they led by 27 at one point, this would somehow be worse if they lost this one. But in the end, it was Kyrie scoring 42 in the game, including several important buckets in the fourth, helping the Mavs to a 7-point victory. What a week it was, Andrew.
Today's show is brought to you by Run Your Pool. Visit play.runyourpool.com/NBA show to win $1,000. Run Your Pool is the home of competition, bringing sports fans and their friends together to connect and compete. Run Your Pool has over 50 game types for every sport you can think of. It's a one-stop shop for sports gaming. With over 2 million players, there's no better place to run your bracket for your friends, family, or office. And with the madness coming, we've decided to team up with Run Your Pool to give you guys a chance to compete in a bracket challenge. It's super simple. You know how this works. You fill out your picks for all 68 teams in the tournament, and you get points for each pick you get right. Run Your Pool is giving away $1,000 for the top 5 finishers, and you get to compete against us to show how much you know ball. I almost forgot the best part. It's completely free to play. So head over to play.runyourpool.com/NBA show, and don't forget to get your picks in when the bracket is live March 12th. That's play.runyourpool.com/NBA show to win $1,000.
All right, Al. Every once in a while, we like to do our little NBA draft check-in with our guy, Sam Bassini from The Athletic and the Game Theory podcast. Sam, what's up, man?
Is this a thing where when Oklahoma City becomes good, that we're no longer going to be friends? That's my question. Like, am I going to be invited back when Oklahoma City no longer has draft picks?
Listen, we are draft freaks. We were having down-to-dunk draft parties when the Thunder were picking 21st, and we were booing them when they took Terrence Ferguson. So we're in this for the long haul, Sam. Don't worry.
I love it. I'm here for it. This is fantastic. No, how's it going, guys? It's great to see you.
It's going great. The draft stuff is starting to really kick into high gear. I'm actually getting super into it. The last time that we had you on, we talked about the perception of this class after Wemby and Scoot. And at the time, you felt like there were a large number of prospects who would potentially play their way into a top 5 pick. We're now only a couple weeks away from March Madness. Is there a pool of prospects from the next tier still as large as ever, or has it been kind of narrowed down somewhat over the last couple months?
So up until recent events with Brandon Miller, where he seems to have brought Darius Miles' firearm to a shooting that resulted in the death of a woman, where Darius Miles and another man, Michael Davis, are currently charged with murder and accused of murder by the state of Alabama. I would have said Brandon Miller looks pretty clearly, at least among teams, as the guy that they trust most at number 3. Mm-hmm. And I think that still is probably the case. NBA teams are obviously doing their due diligence and obviously being very patient in terms of the way that they operate in gathering information and not making quick decisions on what happened with Brandon Miller. It seems like there is a lot of information still to come in regard to this. So far, publicly, at the very least, we have gotten a set of testimony from a police officer, as well as a statement from Brandon Miller's attorney in regard to what Brandon's case is in terms of what his involvement was in this shooting. And we'll see where it goes. I'm trying to be very patient in terms of I want to wait to hear everything out with this before I jump to conclusions, one way or another. I think it's very possible that Brandon Miller did something incredibly wrong here. I think it's very possible that Brandon Miller is a witness. The fact that the state of Alabama seems to be treating him as a cooperating witness seems to be at least something to consider within all of this. And I at least want to be patient in terms of not jumping to a conclusion in one way or another before figuring all of this out in regard to his draft stock. And of course, it's just worth noting that like draft stock is, tangential to all of this. A woman lost her life. There's a 5-year-old, boy that is going to be without his mother for the rest of his life. So, I understand the question here. And Brandon Miller, we have to talk about him in some respect as a basketball player, but there is that aspect of it. And the question wasn't even about Brandon Miller. Obviously, it was just a general question, but Brandon is a big question hanging over this. Amen Thompson is another guy that the Thompson twins in general, maybe we want to talk about them next.
Yeah.
They are polarizing across front offices. Like there are front offices that think Amen Thompson is like the highest upside player in this class outside of Victor and Scoot. There are front offices that I've talked to that think that he has a real potential to be a liability due to his lack of shooting and due to some potential issues as a half-court processor. So it's real hit or miss when you get to those guys. I think Cam Whitmore is another guy that teams are a bit polarized on, depending on if you really buy the shot creation ability or if you are concerned about the fact that he doesn't seem to process well as a passer and a playmaker. And the defense has been a bit hit or miss throughout the course of the season, just in terms of exchanges and communication, things like that. Anthony Black and Jarris Walker are guys that are really talented, really seem to process the game at a high level, but have limitations. In Anthony Black's case as a shooter, in Jarris Walker's case, is he just like an undersized big, or is he more of a, 6'7", 6'8" with a super long wingspan forward that can bring a lot to the table as a potential ball handler and things like that. So I would say that there are still a lot of questions after the top two. It's just that the questions now are maybe a bit different and they are a bit more crystallized in terms of how to think about this.
So one of the players you just mentioned, who happens to be one of the biggest risers from your first mock in October until now, is Jarris Walker, who you now have at 5 in your most recent mock draft. The defensive upside has always been there. What have been the major developments in his offensive game that have caused him to jump up the rankings? And do you believe that what he's shown offensively will translate to the NBA?
Yeah, I go back and forth on it. He's one that I ride the roller coaster with. There are a lot of guys in this class I feel like I'm riding the roller coaster with a little bit in terms of evaluating them and just like where I fall on them in the context of the rest of the players in the class. In Jarris's case, I was someone who had him a little bit lower, largely because I always saw him as a bit more of a big as opposed to a defensive wing. And I was a little bit worried about, if he's just a 6'8" big, how does this work? And the thing that really showcased itself was the fact that he can move in space, the fact that he is someone that's going to be able to hold up in a lot of different defensive situations. That was something that I thought he could probably do, but the fact that he's doing it not just at an acceptable level, but actually at a really high level, I think is really commendable to him in terms of showcasing this skill, and commendable to the defensive scheme, which is hyper aggressive at Houston, that allows him to showcase these skills. I really, really buy him on defense now. Offensively, that's why I have him more in like that 7 or 8 range, as opposed to people who I've seen have him in the top 4 or 5. I think he's a really good processor of the game. I think he's a great passer. I think that if you use him in short roll settings, where he's the screener, takes 2 steps, gets that, middle of the court, takes the pass from his guard, he can really cut you up from the middle of the court as a passer. And he has the ability to put the ball on the deck once and then get to the rim and finish. The shot mechanics worry me a little bit. He has touch, which is really, really important, but he has like some hitchy shot mechanics, which feel a bit hit or miss. And then on top of it, he is a rudimentary ball handler at this point, I would say. He has these long strides that allow him to get to the rim, but I worry about the shake and if he can actually be like a real shot creator in any way. So if you have questions about the shot and you have questions about him handling the ball, there's a lower offensive floor, I think, than the typical potential top 5 or 6 pick, but defensively, I really buy him, and I think that those concerns are fixable moving forward. He is a very tricky one that I again, like I said, like I ride the roller coaster in terms of, there are some days where I think he is, I think he's a better basketball player right now than Cam Whitmore, but at the end of the day, like Cam Whitmore's shot creation ability is just so ridiculous, I think, in terms of being able to gather and create that separation, that I kind of just have to default to Whitmore personally. I think that there are going to be teams and evaluators that feel differently, though.
Yeah, there's just something like aesthetically about Jarris's like offensive game that just feels off. Like I've watched him a bunch and really want to like him, but then there's just like he just feels a little out of control at times that I just don't really know what to do with it. But
well, I mean, like the guy that it's worth considering him next to is Jeremy Sohan last year, right? And all three of us were so fans.
Yep.
We were really, really in on the idea of what he can be, but Jeremy's just a little bit more fluid, I think, in the way he moves than Jarris, whereas Jarris can be a little bit more robotic at times, I think.
Yeah.
I think Jeremy's movement skills and his ability to handle give him just a little bit more upside as a creator than Jarris. But I think that like Jarris's even defensive ability and his power, like Jarris is a 240-pound like man who has a 7'2" wingspan and just like bullies players. That's going to give him a higher floor than what Sohan has. So it's, it's going to be really, really interesting to see where teams come down on all of this.
Yeah. This is a question from erig17. In your February 15th mock, you had Nick Smith Jr. at 12, saying that scouts desperately want to see more tape on Smith and that he could end up in the top 5 or in the bottom of the lottery. Since that mock, Smith has played 4 more SEC games, averaging 32 minutes, 18 points per game. Does his recent play have you leaning more toward top 5 or bottom of the lottery?
I'm middle of the pack right now. I have Nick at number 9. And what I really like about Nick is the ability to play as an off-ball scorer. I think that is where his skill set shines best right now. Playing next to someone like Anthony Black, finding those gaps as a cutter, being aggressive in trying to find little creases, little cracks, trying to find, little openings in the defense to separate from his man and create an open 3-point shot. I think his feel offensively for finding space is just absolutely exceptional. In terms of the on-ball stuff, I think there's a lot left there right now to be desired. He was a guy that struggled he's not like the most explosive guy in the world. He relies on craft. He relies on his footwork to really get separation. This is kind of why the guy I've always thought of him as being similar to stylistically is Jamal Murray. Someone that plays really, really well next to someone like Nikola Jokic, can knock down shots from distance, but isn't the most explosive separator with the ball in his hands, and frankly tends not to put a lot of pressure on the rim. That's actually the biggest thing that is lacking from Nick Smith's game right now. He's not a guy that puts a lot of pressure on the basket. A lot of it is from the 3-point line and contested mid-range jumpers at this point. Even when he gets that crease to the rim, he tends to settle for little floaters as opposed to trying to create that contact and get to the foul line, right? I think that it's really, really tricky with Nick. And then there's also the idea that at Arkansas, that team without Trevon Brazile, who's an interesting draft prospect in his own right, that team has no space on the interior for him, especially when he is driving and Anthony Black is on the opposite side. And, you have the Mitchells, you have Jalen Graham, you have, Ricky Council, who's more of a mid-range gunner than a 3-point gunner. Everything is so condensed, so it's a bit harder for Nick Smith, but I do like him as a top 10 pick. I think that the floor has probably risen a little bit. I just don't know that we've seen that like ceiling creation yet on the ball from him that really, makes me enthusiastic about his top 5 potential necessarily.
So you had mentioned Cam Whitmore, and that one of the questions about him is his passing, his playmaking. He's currently averaging 0.7 assists per game, has a 6.1% assist percentage. I went back and looked at some good NBA forwards who had a similar lack of assists in college. The two names that popped up were John Collins and Larry Markkinen. How concerning is that lack of playmaking? Is there any context to his situation at Villanova that might help to explain it?
The answer is like not totally, to be
Okay.
honest with it. He's kind of unlike a lot of people that I've evaluated before because of the lack of passing. And it's interesting, like the guys that I've kind of in my mind considered as not stylistically similar, but like Kim Whitmore is 230 pounds. He's 6'7". He is explosive and physical and strong. Like he bullies guys, but also has these long strides that allow him to like get all the way to the rim if he wants to. Right. And the guy that it almost reminds me most of in terms of the way that it could work itself out on the NBA court is Ben Mathurin last year. So Ben is another guy that is just super explosive athletically. He's 6'6" to 6'7", very powerful athlete, very explosive, can get up and down in transition. Villanova is a team that while they have Eric Dixon, who can space the floor at the 5 and is like a little bit more physical when he wants to post, but largely he's a guy that's going to space at the 5. The rest of this team doesn't really have a lot of floor spacing around Cam Whitmore, and there aren't often driving lanes for him to find open areas. I think that once he gets to the NBA, we might see him just be able to bully guys to the basket in the same way that Benedict Mathurin was not necessarily an elite free throw rate guy at Arizona, but his athleticism, his aggressiveness as a driver, and his aggressiveness out in transition allowed him to pressure the basket at a very, very high level. On top of that, with Whitmore, you also add in the ability, he just is so good at gathering and creating those open looks. He's really good at getting his feet underneath him, getting his balance underneath him, either out of, complicated multiple move ball handling, stringing together multiple moves off the bounce, or out in transition, finding it off the catch, finding the 3-point line, knocking down a 3, right? So I think that the scoring ability with Whitmore and just his overall physicality is going to give him a real shot to be able to exert that at the NBA level, given the footwork and given the skills that he already has in terms of his body control.
You're muted, Andrew.
In every draft, there are several prospects at the top who have 3-point shooting as their biggest question mark. How would you rank the following prospects in terms of your confidence of them developing a shot from most confident to least confident? So Scoot Henderson, Amin Thompson, Jarris Walker, Nick Smith, and Anthony Black. So give me your most confident to least confident.
Yeah, I would say Nick Smith is just going to shoot. Like, I'm not real worried about him as a shooter.
Okay.
I think Scoot is already polished and developed enough as a mid-range shooter that I would say he is next. I do think Scoot is going to shoot at some point. I feel like pretty confident of that fact, to be honest. That's why I have him as like the best guard that I have really evaluated since I've been doing this. Oh man. So it's Jarris and the Thompson twins now and Anthony Black.
Yeah, Jarris. Yeah, we can do both Thompson twins and then Anthony Black. Yeah.
Who was the one you particularly asked about? Amin?
Yeah, just Amin.
I think Amin is the one I'm least confident in. I
Okay.
can just start there. I'm like actually pretty worried about his shot. I don't like it mechanically. I think it's just going to take a lot of work to make that functional at the NBA level, at least in terms of the role he's going to play, because for all of those skills I just brought up from Cam Whitmore, just in terms of his ability to balance and, gather and get his feet up under him, I think Amin really struggles with that, and Amin's
Mhm.
going to spend a lot of his time on the ball, if not almost all of his time on the ball. So not having that skill really actually quite worries me a little bit. Um, I would say of this group, I think I'm probably Jarris has the best touch. I don't know how it's going to extend out. I would say Jarris is probably next just in terms of the best touch. And then probably him and Anthony Black are like pretty close. Anthony's pretty confident as a shooter, even if it doesn't go in all the time. I think that he also has touch. It's just a real mechanical issue. I think Jarris's mechanical issues are probably, given the role that they're going to play, a little bit easier to fix. Jarris just has to be able to make like a spot three, a corner three. I don't see any of these guys as real movement shooters necessarily.
Yeah.
And then I would say Asar next. And Asar has made strides in terms of the mechanics and looks a little bit less robotic. If Asar shoots, I wouldn't be totally surprised necessarily. I think that I would be a bit surprised if Amin shoots. I would not be crazy surprised if Asar shoots. And Anthony Black and Jarris Walker, I think, have a like solid chance to get to average shooters.
So going from some questionable shooters to someone we are pretty confident in their shooting, Dariq Whitehead came into this season as a highly recruited prospect, but has been disappointing. He fell from 7th in your initial mock draft to 21st in your most recent one. You wrote about him. Does the tape on Whitehead, or does the tape Whitehead put together in his high school career outweigh what we saw from him at Duke, or do we trust the tape that says he's not a first-round pick right now? The shooting has been real so far, but what was on that high school tape outside of the shooting that initially got scouts so excited about him?
Oh, he was just a way better athlete. He looks, to be honest, like since he's gotten back from that, he got hurt at the beginning of the year with Duke, and he seems to be a bit heavy compared to what he was at Montverde. And I think that what the result of that has been is diminishing his explosiveness. This was a guy that was like, he was never like the strongest athlete in the world. He was never Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore in that class of athleticism, but he was super aggressive and he had like a pretty real first step to where if he got downhill in a straight line, he was strong enough to go through people at the rim and finish. And plus he has really good touch. He also just has the ability to dunk on people, right? So it's that explosiveness. We haven't seen that level of explosiveness. And I think there's a real reason we haven't seen that level of explosiveness. There's a real explanation for, I believe he's represented for NIL, at least by Excel. There's a real case that Excel or whoever represents him in the end can make, saying, you know, we didn't get to see the best of him. And we also have a prior, you know, a precedent for this just a season ago with AJ Griffin.
Yeah. I was going to ask, is it a similar thing?
I think it is. And AJ Griffin got hurt in the preseason. He got back. He honestly looked a bit heavier than what he looks right now. So I kind of wonder, I'm not accusing Duke of anything. I just wonder if their training, you know, in rehab stuff results in these guys getting a little bit heavier as they're trying to strengthen the areas around those muscles. And it might result, you know, over the course of the one season where they're at Duke, in looking a little bit less explosive, possibly. This is a hypothesis. This is not me like reporting this or anything. This is just me trying to come up with potential answers here. But AJ Griffin got to the NBA and just looked way more fluid and mobile and coordinated in terms of his drives and in terms of looking just less square. AJ Griffin played very square to the basket last year and like struggled to turn his hips, it felt like. That has been much less of an issue in Atlanta this year. And I would imagine that a big part of that was the training that he did in the offseason and the training that Atlanta gave him in order to fix those problems.
You had some interesting names at the back end of the lottery in your most recent mock. Rayon Rupert at 13, Jalen Hood Shafino at 14, and Jet Howard at 15. Three players who've all risen up draft boards this season. Who of those three do you think has the best shot to continue rising even further by draft day and potentially be a top 10 pick?
I'd say Rupert is the guy. So Rupert has gone from being like a really interesting 6'7" wing with a 7'3" wingspan that is a project, basically, right?
Mhm.
Grew up kind of playing a little bit of point guard in France, grew into this ridiculous frame, and has always been a developing shooter. Over the course of his time in New Zealand, he is first and foremost a dogged worker. Like, he is like, you have to lock him out of the gym to stop him from overworking himself. Worker, from what I've been told. And you can see that he has gotten stronger. You can see that his overall comfort playing with professionals has increased drastically over his time in the NBL. This is a guy who is a starting player. He plays like 20 to 25 minutes a night on a team that is in the NBL finals right now, based upon his defense, where the Breakers are the best defensive team in the NBL. He's not necessarily a guy you can make a case should have won the defensive player of the year in the league, but his defensive ability is absolutely exceptional. He is unbelievable at the point of attack. His ability to stay attached to players in screening situations is absolutely terrific. His help defense, his team defense, it's all top notch. He is the epitome of a professional there. He has gone about crafting his game in the exact way that NBA teams will value him. On top of it, you guys as Thunder fans know this better than anybody. We mentioned before we went live, Terrence Ferguson is a name that Oklahoma City has drafted before. Alex, are you looking behind you to see if Terrence is actually like standing behind you?
No, it just started hailing in Portland. I was trying to figure out what the sound was.
Then also Ousmane Dieng is another name here. That was RJ Hampton drafted by the Thunder and then moved on draft night as well, maybe? Like, I can't remember if that's how that worked or not. So you guys are well aware of,
but yeah, we know.
Yeah. You guys are well aware of how these guys typically look in Australia.
Yeah.
It took 10 games for Ousmane Dieng for a Breakers team last year that was absolutely terrible at the end of the year, where they just kind of let him rock, for teams to go, oh, lottery, draft him in the lottery. RJ Hampton is a guy that really struggled in the NBL. LaMelo Ball, his team did not win games in the NBL. They were pretty terrible. And then, Terrence Ferguson barely played. You can go up and down the list. A lot of these guys, this is the first one that has genuinely contributed to winning basketball and has gotten real minutes that are impactful for his team in regard to a playoff race. Yeah. So I think that speaks exceptionally highly of Rayon Rupert. And then you throw in all of the intel, you throw in the fact that I think the shot is not broken. And you throw in the fact that he is a sharp player who has real feel for the game from having grown up playing that point guard position. I personally have him around like 10 or 11 right now, but I think teams are more in the like back half of the lottery to, maybe 17, 18, 19 range.
Okay. So I have a question from 405 Sports Fan who asks, why is Taylor Hendricks not higher on your board, Sam? Statistically, he's as good. Don't answer yet. Statistically, he's as good as anyone. He's 6'9", 7'3" wingspan, shooting 41% from three, almost 2 blocks and a steal per game. Looks like he moves pretty well. A lot of mocks have him creeping into their top 10. What am I missing?
Yeah, you're not missing anything. Taylor Hendricks is someone that I have at like 11 or 12 now. So I have him like right in the range with Rupert on my board. He is, the more I talk to teams, the more I think he might be the like surprise guy that nobody has as like a top 10 pick right now, that teams are like, oh no, like this is a real potential top 10 pick. Moves really well. That was the thing that I struggled with early on to try and figure out how well does he move on the perimeter. And I think he can be a bit upright. I think he can play like a bit tall in his stance, but at the same token, I think that his movement ability and his fluidity and his feet are actually pretty good, and that he's probably going to be able to make it work as a switch defender, at least at the very least, like not necessarily like a full scale switch defender, but like a good enough player that's going to be able to deal with twos, maybe not necessarily the fastest twos, but be able to like switch out onto them, not get toasted. Right. really sharp help defender as a rim protector, weak side rim protector at the very least. Plays the center a decent amount for UCF. Sometimes they have the Lahat Thione kid who ends up at center, but Hendricks, they switch a lot. They end up with him kind of across the board positionally. Really, really buy the defense at a high level. I buy the shot at a high level. It's just I don't know where the ball skills are right now. He seems to feel pretty comfortable dribbling. I don't feel that comfortable when he dribbles. I'll say that. I haven't seen him make too many high level passes this year, but at the end of the day, 6'9", long arms, very mobile, good help defense instincts, really good shooter. That tends to be the pathway now, as Thunder fans know. Positional size, positional length, real athleticism, switchable defense, shooting. If you can find those guys, they tend to go a little bit higher in the draft.
So we have a question from Nick Sanchez, PhD. Do you have an early favorite for a projected second rounder who could become an elite role player in a few years?
Elite role player. Oh, honestly, I don't love the second round in this class, if I'm being completely transparent.
Okay.
I would say Kevin McCullough is probably the guy that stands out if the shooting ever comes along. I mean, elite level defender, can put the ball on the floor enough as a second side creator, finalist for defensive player of the year, great point of attack, can defend 1 through 3, physical enough to match up with 4s if he gets locked onto one. It's all about the shooting. I know that teams that saw him pre-draft last year said that he went in and, had some moments where he really knocked down shots, but he's shooting like 30% from 3 right now. And over the course of his career, it's something like 30 to 31% from 3. So if he can shoot it, that's one. I'm honestly going through the process now of trying to find the guys that I think are potential stash guys, not even stash, like maybe like promise guys, or, guys that are maybe first round picks next year, but want to leave college. And, maybe a team like the Thunder, they currently have pick 37, Boston, who has a bunch of open roster spots at the end of their roster. Trying to find those guys that I think like could really end up being high leverage selections in this year's class.
Okay, Sam, last question. Last week on the Low Post, Zach had Jonathan Gavoni on. He asked him a very interesting question that I wanted to get your take on. He was asking him if he could be the GM for one of the bottom 4 teams, how would he rank them? Instead of making you the GM, I just want to get your general feeling about these 4 franchises. Houston, Charlotte, Detroit, San Antonio, based on everything you know as of today in terms of their draft position, current players, future picks, owners, management, all that. How would you rank those 4 franchises as far as betting on their futures?
Charlotte last. I just don't really have a lot of faith in their ownership or front office, to be honest. Like I just don't. I don't have a lot of faith in anything. I think Mitch Kupchak does a good job of evaluating second rounders. That's really the only positive thing I can say about that front office right now. Let's see, Houston, Detroit, and San Antonio.
San Antonio.
I think I would have San Antonio third right now, if only because they don't really have any of the centerpieces yet. Like they don't have, like who would you consider their best prospect? Probably Sohan at this point, right? Maybe Devin Vassell.
Vassell and yeah, that's probably right.
I like both of those guys a lot. I think they're starters. I don't think they're potential all-stars. With Houston, I can squint and say, I see all-star upside for Alperen Şengün. I can see all-star upside for, X, Y, and Z guy. I can't see all-star upside for, Devin Vassell and Sohan right now. I think I'd go Detroit 1 because I like Cade. I like Jaden Ivey. I think that I would take those 2 over Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, and Alperen Şengün at this point.
What about, we all know who's going number 1 in this draft, but are there any teams that any of those teams that if they got number 2 would think twice about taking Scoot Henderson just for fit reasons, or should they just say, screw it, we have to take this guy no matter who else is on our team?
Yeah, look, that's what I would do. It wouldn't even be a question in my mind. Again, I think Scoot would be the number 1 pick in a majority of drafts that we've seen recently. I think he's an absolute like superstar.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think there are teams that look like Detroit went
specifically
down the road,
Detroit would just be my question. Like,
yeah, like look, Detroit went down the road of considering Jalen Green the year that they took Cade Cunningham, right?
Yeah.
Like to the point where, you know, all of what I was told and all of what our colleague James Edwards was told was that they really undertook a process when in reality, you know, any other human being on the planet would have taken Cade Cunningham. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
let me rephrase. Any other human being in an NBA front office would have taken Cade Cunningham at that point. You know, there are the contrarians out there that were high on Evan Mobley, the contrarians that, you know, love Jalen Suggs and love Jalen Green, but you know, I think 30 out of 30 teams would have taken Cade Cunningham. And Detroit, they really undertook a process, right? They really undertook a robust decision-making effort to decide what they want to do. And often I think this Detroit front office makes dumbfounding decisions. The decision to trade for Marvin Bagley, and then the decision to get Marvin Bagley and give him 3 years, $39 million, and the continual amount of resources that they put into the big position when they already have Jalen Duren, who looks really good. So
what did you think of the James Wiseman acquisition?
I think it's really good for him to get playing time.
Yeah.
They didn't give up anything. Like, look, here's the thing. They didn't give up anything that's like going to kill them long term. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
I would probably, I'm not a big Sadiq Bey fan. Okay. I would not want to pay Sadiq Bey 8 figures a year personally. So in that vein, I thought that it was reasonable to trade Sadiq Bey for James Wiseman. I would rather have Jalen Duren long-term than James Wiseman. And I don't think that they're going to have success playing together. So you basically kick the can down the road for a year to see what you have with Wiseman. You kick the contract can down the road a year, basically. You know, I don't think that James Wiseman is going to be as demanding of an extension this summer in the same way that Sadiq Bey may have been. Yeah. So I don't, did I hate it? No. Do I think it's a situation that is, you know, James Wiseman's last landing spot over the next couple of years? I probably don't, but you know, I've been encouraged by the pick and roll and the rim running ability that we've seen so far. He just has a long way to go defensively because he's lost a lot of reps over the course of the last 3 or 4 years.
Last question. Who are your favorite rookies to watch this year?
Oh, I would say, I mean, the not sexy answer is Keegan Murray. I really just enjoy watching that.
He's good. He's just a really good player, man.
Well, and they use him in really creative ways. Like they've started using him off of movement at a really high level. They've started using him, you know, in dribble handoffs. They've started to incorporate him in creative actions where teams are expecting, like, you know, a zoom action or a pistol action with the De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, and they'll play off of that using Keegan now, right? Yeah, Keegan's a good example. I really like, you know, Jalen Williams obviously is terrific. Just, you know, the all around game, from being able to dribble, pass, shoot, to taking on tough defensive assignments at the very least. I don't think he's very good at it yet, but you know, he's 6'6" with a 7'2" wingspan. I think that's a big part of his future. And a big part of him becoming the player that he can be is like a hyper elite level role player, or like the second or third best player on a really good team. Yeah, I mean, like it's been a bit of a struggle to watch Paulo recently, I think, just because of the inefficiency. I think it's been a bit of a struggle to watch Ben
Yeah.
Mathurin recently. Walker Kessler, great as he has been, and he has been absolutely phenomenal. I'm not sitting there turning to Jazz games because I want to go watch great technical drop coverage defense. You
He's
know what I
great. He
mean?
is great at it, but
Yeah, like all due respect to Walker, and he's been phenomenal. I'm not
Yeah.
taking anything away from him.
yeah.
I'm just saying I'm not turning to the game. I'm turning to watch Laurie Markkinen dunk on everybody and
Yeah.
be as incredible as he's been.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of someone who's like a little bit off the beaten path, maybe. I mean, maybe Jaden Ivey is, to talk about Detroit as we just did. Jaden Ivey's taken some real strides over the course of the last month or so.
No doubt.
Really,
He
even
shot the ball well lately.
Yeah, 6 weeks. The game is slowing down for him, which for someone who has the immense explosiveness that he has, that ability to have the game slow down a little bit, I think has just been so critical. He is obviously in the midst of a run where he's knocking down shots, but the thing that's more important for me is the pace. Like it seems like his mind is starting to see what's on the court a little bit quicker, and he's able to change gears a little bit more, which allows him to get the most out of his athleticism when he utilizes it on the court. So that'd probably be another one. And then, Mark Williams with Charlotte has been really interesting recently as well.
Yeah, he's played well. Go follow Sam on Twitter at Sam_Vicini. Go listen to the Game Theory podcast. And you can also listen to it on YouTube. If you prefer to listen to or just watch people talk on YouTube, you can also watch this show on YouTube. Search the Athletic NBA show, but also search the Game Theory podcast. And of course, read Sam on the Athletic. Sam, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Today's show was brought to you by our friends at ExpressVPN. Visit expressvpn.com/ding for more information. You guys have heard me discuss the importance of having a VPN to protect your online privacy before. But choosing a VPN you trust is just as important. Now, I like to research our sponsors, and I like to only recommend brands that I believe in. And I can tell you, ExpressVPN is the best VPN on the market. Number one, they don't log your activity. Lots of other VPN services make money by selling your data to advertisers. ExpressVPN does not do this. Number two, ExpressVPN is fast. ExpressVPN uses Lightway, a new VPN protocol that they engineered to make user speeds faster than ever. The last thing you need to know about ExpressVPN is that it's easy to use. There are no technical skills required to get set up. You just launch the app, and in one click, you're covered. So protect yourself with VPN that I use and trust. Use our link, expressvpn.com/ding today, and get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/ding. Visit expressvpn.com/ding to learn more.
All right, Andrew, it is now time for the Wheel of Fandom, our weekly segment where we spin a wheel, it lands on a team, and we become fans of that team for the next week. This past week, the Wheel of Fandom landed on the Atlanta Hawks at arguably the perfect time as they were going through a period of transition. A week ago, the Hawks fired Nate McMillan, and this week we got our first look at Quinn Snyder, the new head coach in Atlanta. The Hawks got 2 big wins this week. The first, a blowout over Cleveland, and the second, a Trae Young game winner over the Nets. Unfortunately, they lost their first game with Snyder in charge, bringing them back to 500, 8th in the East. Per Cleaning the Glass, the Hawks are 16th in offense, 21st in defense. Andrew, if our favorite team is the Hawks, who is our guest?
We've got Brad Rowland, the host of the Locked On Hawks podcast. Brad, what's up, man?
Thanks for having me, guys. Quinn Snyder will never be as good as Joe Prunty was as the Hawks interim head coach.
The Joe Prunty era.
An amazing run.
We did get to watch Quinn Snyder's first game as a head coach. It was a close loss to the Wizards. Knowing how Snyder's teams played in Utah, is there anything from those Jazz teams that you're hoping that he can bring from the Jazz to the Hawks offensive playbook?
Yeah, I think a little bit more innovation, generally speaking, is probably the easiest way to get into it because while Nate McMillan has his strengths, innovation on offense is not one of those strengths. And I think as soon as they got DeJounte Murray, it was pretty clear to a lot of people that like Nate was not going to be the guy to maximize those two players, Trae Young and DeJounte in the backcourt. So, obviously at the end of Utah, they had Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley playing together. And that's a pretty decent analog for what Trae and DeJounte can be. And also just like, using two bigs freely and being able to do that with John, as long as John Collins is still on this team, and he still is at this moment in time. They had Derek Favors and Rudy Gobert playing together, so that's a couple little things. And just generally speaking, Quinn is just well regarded on offense, and I think this team has really needed that infusion of the ability to kind of adapt to personnel and also just be a little bit more innovative.
Could you talk a little bit more about that Trae DeJounte pairing, because that's kind of been a topic of conversation since the trade. They've now played 51 games together. How have you seen their chemistry on the court develop over the course of the season? How are you feeling about that core as like a long-term backcourt for the Hawks?
Yeah, I think it's gone reasonably well. It's not gone perfectly by any means, nor has it been a disaster. And I think people that don't watch the Hawks might assume that it's just not going well at all because of the record the Hawks have. They're underachieving, and big picture, it's like first people to get the heat there are Trae number one, and then maybe DeJounte number two. And I think if you look at like the way they've played together, it's been a lot of like your turn, my turn is the way I would say it, which is expected on some level. Like those guys are both point guards. So that's a very simple way to put it, but they both used to having the ball in their hands, Trae in particular. And I think that the results have been pretty strong when those guys play together. I think they're like plus 4.2 net rating when they play together. That's not incredible, but it's pretty solid for a team that's 500. And I'm looking forward to see how they play off each other more, because right now, again, it's kind of that, your turn now, my turn later. And when they split up, it's a lot of both guys, just a lot of usage on both ends. That's going to happen, but I'm looking forward to seeing how Snyder kind of implements some more like, I don't know, playing off of each other is probably the best way to put it. Just, using each other's strengths and weaknesses to their advantage and being able to kind of create space. And, especially with DeJounte on the ball and Trae off has been the part that I think a lot of people wanted to see coming in. And DeJounte has not been able to necessarily do that. And I think maybe with a little bit more play design, Trae moving more off the ball could unlock some things on both sides.
So the defense has been an issue in Atlanta again. The Hawks are 21st in defense despite adding DeJounte Murray last summer. In the Trae Young era, the Hawks have been unable to field a top half defense over a full season. How optimistic are you that Snyder can get this roster to play defense?
It's a big question, of course, especially when, look, I mean, I think Trae's actually been a little bit better this year defensively, but that's better on a very low bar, of course. Trae's never going to be a great defender. And I think that is one inherent challenge. And I think that kind of probably limits them from being an elite defense at any point. But I do think the Hawks can construct and have for limited stretches a defense that's pretty decent with Trae Young. That's possible. And I think the mole was always going to be incredible offense and pretty good defense as far as like building a contending level team if you're the Hawks. But I think that Snyder will be hopefully instrumental in kind of boosting that. He built the whole ship around Rudy Gobert in Salt Lake City, and it worked at a high level. Obviously in the playoffs, famously perimeter stuff was kind of a disaster for the Jazz and they couldn't stop anybody and Rudy was overstretched. But the Hawks have decent personnel. If you look up and down the roster, personnel is not terrible on this roster defensively. There are some guys who are questions. Trae, AJ Griffin is still a rookie, and rookies are generally pretty bad, etc. But Clint Capella is good. Kongwu's good. John Collins is a good defender. I think DeJounte Murray, honestly, is a little bit overrated defensively. And I say that in a nice way. Like, I think he gets steals, and that generally jumps off the page. He's a really good active off-ball guy, but his on-ball defense has been lacking. And I kind of heard that, actually, back to San Antonio, I kind of poked around the guys who cover that team, and they were like, hey, don't be fooled. He's not going to like change your life as an on-ball defender. He's more of an off-ball creator. And I think that'll be an area I think still to watch for this Hawks team is another on-ball defender, because they kind of want DeJounte roaming. They have DeAndre Hunter, but scheming around Trae, they're going to have to almost be perfect defensively to really build that top 10 defense that they want. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Quinn does. And I think just as this team gets better, there's room to grow defensively, but I think there is kind of a ceiling unless you just have just perfect personnel around him.
We haven't really asked you about like the fan opinion of this hire. Is it generally pretty excited from the Hawks fan base that they were able to get Quinn Snyder?
I think so. I mean, he got like a standing ovation at the first introduction of his first game, which is kind of funny. Like, it's a very odd thing to see a coach get like appreciated like that before a game. I think a lot of that probably has to do with the fans were just kind of done with Nate McMillan. And that's a very natural fan thing, especially when the team's underachieving. The coach is the first guy out of the box. It's going to get all the heat. I think Nate has, there's a sentiment out there that he's just like this disastrous coach now. And maybe Millen's been around for a long time. I don't think he's a great coach, but he's not a disaster. Like he's perfectly fine in a lot of instances. But when a fan base turns on your coach, the next guy's going to get a bump no matter what. And then you throw in Snyder's actual track record. He's been good, obviously, as a head coach in Utah. He didn't win championships or anything like that. But I think you can point to a successful track record over 6-8 seasons in Utah, and then factor in, Nate's removal. And also mid-season, the whole thing is just very strange. It's kind of unprecedented almost for a team as good as the Hawks have been. Obviously, they're not been great this year, but they're still trying to win. To change their coach with 22 games to go or whatever it was, that just doesn't ever happen. So I think it's a little bit of a malaise right now, but everybody's kind of excited about Quinn Snyder just because he's not Nate and he's a proven winner.
So the other big move that they had was a trade that brought in Sadiq Bey from Detroit to Atlanta. What have been your initial thoughts on his immediate fit, and what do you think about their long-term plan for him with him being extension eligible this summer?
I thought it was pretty interesting as a move because the Hawks have a particular set of, I would say, self-constrained impact in terms of their luxury tax avoidance. They kind of refuse to go into the tax. And getting Sadiq Bey for the cost of, weird cost of 5 second-round picks was a move to both add talent and add depth, but also not get much more expensive. Like he's still on a rookie contract, and that was, I think, a big part of the appeal of bringing him in. I'll be surprised if he gets extended this summer because, look, he's going to be a backup on this team and not a bad one. Like he'll be a 6th, 7th man, I would imagine. But generally, guys who are reportedly asking for a lot of money, Sadiq Bey, if you listen to people in Detroit, wanted a lot of money probably when he hits an extension. And that's not usually how that goes for role players like him. But at the very least, he's cheap next year for the Hawks. He's fit in well as kind of that combo forward. He gives them a different look as a backup 4. John Collins, a little bit more traditional big at the 4 versus Bey is more of a pure spacer combo forward type. Defensively, it's been an adventure so far, but I would say charitably, he's literally played for 4 different coaches in about 2 weeks. So there's probably a little bit of a learning curve there. I think defensively is going to be where I'm a little bit worried about Sadiq Bey, but as far as like just impact on the roster, he just gives them extremely valuable depth. The Hawks have a very stark lack of depth, like beyond the top 8 or 9 guys on this year's team, and it lost them some games early in the season. And just adding another guy who they can trust to be a pretty solid player who can space the floor and just be a guy out there has already been really helpful and will be helpful next year too.
So you mentioned the luxury tax concerns. So this summer, is your expectation that they do make a move to get either below the luxury tax or close to the luxury tax? And would that be likely John Collins or Bogdanovich or someone else?
Yeah, my general operating is until they pay it, I'm going to assume they don't pay it, if that makes sense. I think going into this season, I was pretty defiant with people locally, just say, look, they're not going to pay the tax. I heard that repeatedly about this particular season, and they're not going to pay the tax this year. Moving forward, I think that there's a world where maybe they would if they are at a certain caliber of like proven winning status. But, until a team does it, you just kind of can't assume they're going to. And right now, if Bogdanovich were to opt in, he has a player option for next year, they're already over the tax line. So they're going to have to do some maneuvering. And Collins has been in rumors, as you guys well know, for 3 years now, essentially. He's a very obvious casualty of that. If they can go ahead and move on from him, they could move Bogdanovich if he were to opt in. I think eventually they're going to have to choose a center between Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu. Not because either one of those guys is not very good. They're both really good, and they're both very different players, but you don't draft a guy like Okongwu at number 6 overall to have him be a backup for his entire rookie contract, which is about to happen. If they don't move off Capella next year, he'll be a backup for 4 years. That was not the plan, especially because Okongwu's good. It's not like he's going to be a bust. Like he's a good player already. So those are the 3 very obvious cost-saving measures they can do. Something with Collins or Bogey or Capella, or they swing bigger and make a combination trade because they're not satisfied. I know one thing internally, they're not loving being 500, and hopefully Quinn Snyder fixes some of that stuff for them. But there is that internal pressure to win and win bigger than they have so far.
Yeah, how do fans feel about the Capella Okongwu battle there?
It goes back and forth. I think that I've always been a little bit higher on Capella than the fan base is. And I think that's just inherent with this young, flashy guy behind him. And I like Okongwu too. Like I like that draft pick a lot. I was very high on him in the draft. He's going to be a really good player. But the tendency is to kind of crap on the veteran in favor of the young guy if you're a fan that you want to see the young guy play. But look, Capella's really good. I think he's a top 10 or 12 center in the league. He's very valuable. He's getting older, obviously. He's not quite as springy as he was in Houston or even early in his Atlanta tenure, but he's still a very valuable player. And there's some challenges, I'll say, to having both of them because neither one of those guys is a shooter, and they're also so different. Like Okongwu's big appeal is that he's this really, I would say, versatile. He's able to get on the floor. He's a really good athlete. He's twitchy. He's very small for a center, admittedly, but he's a lot of flexibility there with him. Whereas Capella's a lot more traditional. He's not a 7-footer, but he's 6'10". He's physical, and he's kind of just that drop defender, pick and roll guy. So trying to design a system around these two very different centers who both need to play is hard. And I think that's a challenge for Snyder as well. But I'm looking forward to them picking a lane, because I think they just kind of have to at some point. And it's not because either one of those guys is that good. They're both really good players. It's just that team building wise, just having Okongwu would be a 20-minute a game backup still. And then entering his extension talks this summer, I'm sure his agency was like, hey, he'd like to start at some point and be a guy. And that's just a logical conversation they have to have.
Yeah. So Hawks rookie AJ Griffin has had a really nice season so far, shooting just under 39% from three. Some of the concerns about AJ in the pre-draft process were his athleticism, defense, and ability to make plays for others. Have any of those concerns been answered by Griffin this season, in your opinion?
I think a little bit, certainly as a rookie and a 19-year-old rookie, he has some defensive questions still. I think that I've kind of thought of him as a guy that you're hoping that they don't have to hide long-term. I don't think he's ever going to be a great defender. He is a little bit limited, just like, quickness wise, but he's big and strong. He's already kind of filled out. He's very physical for a guy who's 19 years old, and he kind of knows what he's doing by 19-year-old standards. He's got a long way to go still, like any rookie would. But I've been a little bit encouraged by that. He's not good yet, but there are some signs. His playmaking has kind of been underutilized because they kind of put him in a pretty small role, which makes sense. They're trying to win now. He's been mostly a catch and shoot guy, but when he's had the opportunity to kind of flash a little bit of that mid pick and roll game, a little bit of that floater game, he's kind of showed that off. And I think, just honestly, it's a big step forward for him to stay healthy for this full season. Knock on wood, he's been healthy all year, and he had major injury concerns dating back to high school. And that's really good. So they love him. I think they're talking about, maybe future star status. Obviously, that's tough to say for a guy who is still a backup on a decent team, but not a great team right now. But he checks every box. And you guys may know this. He used to be the #1 player in that high school class until he had injuries. And the upside really is there for a guy who could be at least a borderline star. And I think he, honestly, beyond Trae and DeJounte, I think based on what they've been saying, he's probably number 3 on their building forward list. Not the best player now by any means, but as far as untouchable and trade stuff, I think they're not going to get rid of AJ Griffin for almost anything. And they are really excited about him. And he's answered a lot of questions, even if he still has some for sure.
Yeah. And you mentioned the idea that they could potentially move on from Capella at some point or have to make a decision. And that just brings up this fact that, I was looking at their basketball reference page, and you kind of forget how young this team is. It feels like the Hawks have been around for a while now, and we all know this team. But they are so young, and if they did move on from someone like Capella, I mean, they would get even younger. And a lot of those young guys there's still a lot of room there for growth and development.
Definitely, and it's an interesting tease, because they went to the conference finals, and you just assume that team is just ready to win now, and that was kind of a mirage. I think everybody kind of knows that now. They weren't quite that good, and they did it. I mean, it was still the best run that they've had in Atlanta. Any team. They won a game in the conference finals. Actually, they won 2. But they're still very young. Capella's the only guy. Sorry, Bogdanovich is the only guy that's a regular that's actually 30. Everybody else is under that, and Capella's the only one that's even above 26. So all of their core guys are still fairly young. Trae Young is very young still. I know he gets a lot. The heat is there on him all the time, but he's 24 years old, and this is only his 5th season in the NBA. So they have a lot of upside still, I think. At the same time, they are also kind of locked in, if you want to view it through that lens of they spent a lot of money on this team, and they're capped out, and there's some flexibility, but they're at the same time young, but also established in a way where they've kind of hitched their wagon to this group, at least for a little while, especially if you factor in Murray's situation. So it's nuanced for sure.
Yeah, I was curious. You mentioned that Trae gets a lot of heat. What's the reaction in Atlanta when people do fake trades, or national people Trae Young is next to be traded, next star to be traded. People are already kind of poaching him off the Hawks.
It's not received well. I'm sure you guys could not be surprised by that.
Yeah.
I will say, in the last year or so, I think both Trae Young and also ownership / leadership have gotten more heat locally than they ever have before. Yeah. There was a honeymoon period where if you said anything that was remotely questioning about Trae, you got yelled at. And that's just what it is. He's obviously the star player. He's very good. And honestly, at this point, I think he's almost underrated nationally. For a long
Sure.
time, he was kind of the picture of a guy who might be overrated given his stats. But I think if you listen to the way he's discussed now, he's kind of fallen off that mainstream radar. And I think he's kind of the same guy. He's really good. He has his weaknesses for sure. But as far as fans are concerned, I think that most people still view him as the guy, and he's their franchise. And quite honestly, he's the most famous, biggest star they've had in 35 years. And that's it's, for longtime fans, like they were better than this as a team in the Al Horford, Joe Johnson era, but those guys are not Trae Young as far as like Q rating is concerned. So I think, realistically, I try to dance around it a little bit. Like there might be a world where he asks out at some point and they have to face that world. That's just the modern NBA in a lot of ways for a team that's not winning at the highest level. But as far as like every time there's a national discussion of something about moving on from Trae or how much pressure he's under, the fan base does not enjoy that and certainly does not really acknowledge it other than just like kind of yelling into the cloud.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for answering our Hawks questions. It is now time to play Andrew versus the Beat, our weekly trivia show where Andrew goes head-to-head against an NBA beat writer this week, Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks. Now, Brad, how this works, I've come up with 8 questions about the Hawks. Some are easy, some are hard. You're going to give me a number between 1 and 8. It'll correspond to a question. If you get it right, you'll get at least 2 points. If you get it wrong, Andrew will have a chance to steal. For 1, we'll go back and forth until all the questions have been asked and answered. So, Brad, just to start us off, all I need is a number between 1 and 8.
2.
Question number 2. Like every NBA team, the Hawks have a growing collection of nicknames on basketballreference.com.
Oh, no.
Oh, geez.
Which of the following is not an official basketball reference nickname for a Hawks player? So I'm going to give you 5 nicknames. 4 are real and appear on Basketball Reference. 1 is fake and made up. So here we go. Sweet Lettuce, Baby Boy, Duncan Deacon, Swiss Bank, Gary Bird. Once again, that is Sweet Lettuce, Baby Boy, Duncan Deacon, Swiss Bank, Gary Bird.
Oh, man. I think it's one of the first 2. I will say Sweet Lettuce is not a real one.
That is correct.
Yeah, baby.
That is actually a nickname. So what I usually do for this is I try to go on like Reddit and see like threads of people trying to come up with nicknames. So when I typed in AJ Griffin nickname, it turns out there's a Texas Rangers pitcher who gave himself the nickname Sweet Lettuce. So I was like, oh, that works. That's a great nickname.
Sweet Lettuce.
All right. And
listen, shouts to Gary Bird, Garrison Matthews, who is
that's a
now a
great
Hawk,
one.
by the way.
Oh, he's gone.
No, he's now a Hawk, I should say. Like no one knows.
now.
I'm sure not even anybody knows that he's on the Hawks at this point. He's not really playing. It's just Gary.
Right.
Shouts to Gary Bird.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew.
Number
What
1.
is yours? Question number 1. The Hawks have fired a coach mid-season twice in the past couple years. They are not alone, however. In the past 5 seasons, there are 3 teams who have fired a coach mid-season 2 different times. Who are those teams? You get 1 point per correct answer. So potentially get 3 points here, Andrew. So it's the last 5 years, and these are teams that have fired a coach mid-season 2 different times.
Mid-season 2 different times. The Kings?
The Kings are incorrect,
Oh,
Andrew. Yeah, if you're going like last 20 years, that would be a good. All right, Brad, you have a chance to steal. You could potentially get 3 points here if you can name these.
Minnesota.
That is correct.
Yes.
Ryan Saunders and Tibbs.
Yeah.
For 1 point.
That was the one I was confident in. Who else has been fired in recent days? This is not going to be good radio. Brooklyn?
That is correct. Kenny Atkinson and Steve Nash.
Wow. Ouch.
Can you make the clean sweep, Brad, and get all 3 points?
I mean, my default, other than the Kings. By the way, I would have said the Kings too, Andrew. You weren't crazy to say that. Oh man, I'm thinking about guys who fire postseason. I honestly don't have a guess. Maybe I'll just say Houston. That's not right. Houston. That's incorrect.
So the other one is Cleveland because of Jim Boeheim and then Ty Lue. Remember, started off 0-6 and fired him. That was just 5. That was exactly 5 years ago.
See, I knew Boeheim and I couldn't think of another guy they fired, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, you're down 4-zip, and Brad, you have control of the board.
Bad.
I will go with number 6.
Question number 6. How many players on the current Hawks roster have ever had a 40-point game in their career? And you don't have to tell me who they are. You just have to give me the number.
I'm gonna think through it. Trae, Jonte. Mm-hmm. I will say 5.
Answer is 5?
Yes, 5.
That is incorrect. Andrew, you have a chance to steal.
Okay. I know for sure 2 of them.
Okay.
Easy too.
I know that Sadiq Bey has done it. Now it's any randos. These guys randomly have 40-point games. I'll say 4 just to hedge.
Well, unfortunately, Andrew, John Collins' career high is 38.
No, is it 3?
Which means the correct answer is 3.
Dang
Trae,
it.
DeJounte, and Sadiq.
I should have
Andrew, you
gone
had a
with
chance
that.
there.
I
You had
should
a chance
have. I should
there.
have gone with that. I was just like, maybe Bogdanovich has done it. Maybe.
Yeah, his was
some
35.
Weird
Yeah.
universe. Justin Holiday did it. Like, I don't know.
All right, Andrew, you have control of the board. Maybe Gary Bird.
Maybe Gary Bird. I mean, who knows? He was on the Rockets. I mean, anything could happen on the Rockets. Number 3.
His was 28. I had to look that up.
Yeah.
Number 3, the Hawks have had 11 different two-man lineups play at least 800 minutes together this season. Only one of those two-man lineups has a negative net rating, according to NBA.com. Who is in that two-man lineup? And you get 1 point per correct name. So these are two-man lineups that have played a lot of minutes together, at least 800 minutes. And this is the only one out of the top 11 that has a negative net rating. Who is in that lineup?
I honestly don't have any clue. DeJounte Murray?
Andrew, that is correct for 1 point. Can you get the other name?
Oh, boy. Let's see. What about Okongwu?
Andrew, that is absolutely correct.
Right?
Wow, I did not think you would get that. Very impressive.
And I'm a sicko, and I actually knew that one because I'm.
Oh, really?
I'm deep in the weeds, as you might imagine. So yeah. I was ready to steal that one for sure.
Well, Andrew, you have cut the lead in half, but Brad, you have control of the board.
Number 8 for Justin Holiday.
Question number 8. The Hawks currently have the 21st ranked defense, according to Cleaning Glass. The last time Atlanta had an above average defense was the 2016-17 season. Who led the Hawks in steals that season?
Ooh, steals. That made it a lot harder. I will say it is Dennis Schroeder.
That is incorrect. Andrew, you have a chance to steal, and I will say this person led them in steals per game and also total steals.
Okay. 16-17 is what you said?
16-17. 2016-17.
Yeah. Oh, what about our other Hawk Thunder relationship here? Tavos Alosha.
Andrew? That is absolutely correct.
Yes.
It was Tabo.
Yes.
Andrew has pulled within one with 3 questions.
I'm melting down.
Go. Andrew, you have control of the board.
Give me number 4.
Question number 4. Despite averaging 26.7 points per game at the break, Trae Young did not make this year's All-Star game. Luckily for Trae, he has made a couple All-Star games. The same can't be said for this player, who scored the most points in NBA history without ever being selected to an All-Star team. Who is that player? Most points without ever making an All-Star team.
Most points without ever making an All-Star team. Gosh, Jamal Crawford?
Andrew, that is correct for 2 points. Former Hawk, Jamal Crawford. You pulled ahead now.
Yeah.
5-4. 2 questions left, but Brad, you have control of the board.
I'll go number 7.
Question number 7. Atlanta takes 38.7% of their shots from mid-range, according to Cleaning the Glass, which is the second highest frequency in the NBA. Which NBA team takes the highest percentage of their shots from mid-range?
Mm-hmm. It was the Hawks for most of the season. Phoenix.
That is correct for 2 points. Oh, all right. That brings us to our final question. There may have been another question that turned out to be incorrect, and I caught it before we recorded. Okay. So this is our final question. Brad is up 6-5. Anyone's game. Whoever wins this game is going to be the winner of the week, which is very exciting. Wouldn't you say you're excited?
I'm excited.
A lot of pressure. A lot of pressure right now.
Okay, so Andrew, you're going to get first stab at this.
Okay.
The question is: Trae Young has 3,101 career assists for the Atlanta Hawks, which is 4th all time. We are going to try to name the other 9 players.
Oh my
the
gosh!
Top 10 for career assists for the Atlanta Hawks. So how this works: Andrew will give me a name, then Brad will give me a name. We'll go back and forth till one of you stumbles, and whoever does not stumble will win the week. So Andrew, I just need an assist guy for the Atlanta Hawks all time.
What about Jeff Teague?
Jeff Teague, number 6 all time. Over to Brad.
Doc Rivers is the all-time leader. So Doc Rivers.
That is correct. Doc Rivers, number 1 all time in Hawks franchise history. Back to Andrew.
Boy. Feel much less confident after that answer that Brad just gave.
Well, this is kind of in my wheelhouse, admittedly. This is not really fair to Andrew, but that's okay.
Yeah. What about Joe Johnson?
Joe Johnson is number 7, Andrew.
Okay.
Wow.
Nice.
A great pull. Back to Brad.
Mookie Blaylock.
Mookie Blaylock, number 2. Brad's just going to rattle these off in order. Andrew.
I don't have the whole list. I don't think. Those 2 I had.
This is going to be rough.
All right, Andrew, can you pull another Hawk out of your hat?
What about Dominique?
Ooh, Andrew, you're still alive because he was number 9. Number 9 in career assists. And we're back to Brad.
Digging for the bottom of the barrel.
All right, now it gets harder. Lenny Wilkins.
Lenny Wilkins, was he on the top 10 career assist list? Yes, he was at number 5.
You scared me.
Oh, boy.
So, Andrew, there's only, let's see here, 1, 2, 3 names left. You guys have named 6 of the other 9 names. So there's only 3 left. Can you get one of the final 3?
Oh, my gosh. Not a lot of great Atlanta point guards recently.
That's true.
This is a really old name that I don't know his stats, but I know that he is a very famous Hawk.
Okay. All right.
Bob Pettit.
True. Bob Pettit, number 8. Back to Brad.
That is what I was going to say. I swear to God, that's what I was going to say. Because he has like every Hawks record.
Wow, this is thrilling.
Oh my gosh.
2 names left.
I was not prepared.
I think I am cooked now. Like
I think I might be cooked too.
Now I will say number 3 on the board is still out there, and then number 10 is the other name.
Number 3 on the board is still out there.
Who could it be?
It's not like, I don't think it's anybody modern. Don't tell me that, but I don't think it's anybody that's like recent.
No hints? Don't look at my face.
Hints. I'm looking up to the ceiling. Nobody can see it except for you guys. I'm looking at the ceiling.
He's got the all-time leaders posted on his ceiling.
Yeah, I wish I did. If I knew the question ahead of time, I would just be right. It'd be right there on my fan I'm looking at. I'm just gonna pick her. Eddie Johnson.
Is Eddie Johnson on the top 10 all-time assist list?
I hate this response because I have no idea if I'm right or not.
He is number 3.
Eddie Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Fast Eddie, Andrew. That means that you have to name number 10 on the Hawks all-time assist leader list, or you lose the week.
I will stall on behalf of Andrew by saying I have no idea that he's number 3 on the list. That sounds insane to me, but hey, I thought he was gonna be like 10 or something. But
My gosh.
all right,
Well, you doubted Fast Eddie.
I did. That was before my time, admittedly.
I am, like I said, cooked here.
You are, by the way.
It's not Dwight Howard. I'll tell you that. It's not Dwight Howard.
not Dwight Howard. Dennis Schroeder didn't play enough for them. I know this is wrong. I'll just say Josh Smith. I have no clue who it is.
That's not even a terrible guess.
Well, Andrew, it's actually a Hall of Famer, a 6-time All-Star.
Oh, it's one of the St. Louis guys then.
And an NBA champ. I'm, of course, talking about Lil Abner, a.k.a. Cliff Hagan. Shout out to Cliff. Still alive at 91 years old.
Of course you are.
Again, I forgot about Lil Abner.
Forgot about Lil Abner.
Well, in an alternate universe, I think I would have won this.
Nope.
But
yeah, I think so. I think in this world that maybe existed a few minutes ago, Andrew might have won.
But today we're giving it to Brad. Congrats, Brad, on winning Andrew versus the beat. Brad, thanks so much for coming on. Go check out Locked On Hawks and then go follow Brad on Twitter at BT Roland. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
All right, Andrew, that was Hawks Week, a very eventful Hawks Week. So that means we got to pick a new team, and we've got 15 teams remaining, half the league, and it's a mix, Andrew. I mean, we could get a team like the Knicks, who are playing so well right now.
Bring on the Knicks.
On the other hand, we could get a team like Detroit or San Antonio.
Or Charlotte. The LaMelo-less Hornets would be...
All right, but we still got, Boston's there, Philly's there, so there are still good teams. Golden State, Steph Curry's coming back this weekend. That'd be a great.
That's right. That's
so
right.
Let's see what the wheel is going to give us this week. Our Wheel of Fandom team will be the Memphis Grizzlies.
Ooh, okay.
That's kind of juicy.
That's pretty juicy. This is a team that some are doubting. This point, are they true contenders or pretenders? Let's find out next week. Hey, if you want to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, we'll read it on the show, just like this one from Zool Sunley. Real good stuff, 5 stars. Love all the pod incarnations, but the Saturday Slam and Jam is a true gem, lighthearted, insightful, and always fun. I'd also like to take this opportunity to suggest that we start saying, Joel drops the hammer when Embiid drains one of those buttery smooth jumpers from the nail. Hashtag Hinky died for our sins. Thanks so much for that review. This one comes from Cossers Rafting. Thank you. 5 stars. I love the show. Come whitewater rafting with us at Coasters in North Wisconsin. Coasters.com. The shows can all come for free. We can go whitewater rafting for free, Al. Listeners, mention this review and you get a buy one, get one whitewater rafting at Coasters.
Wow, hell yeah.
This person is really taking advantage of these 5-star reviews. Very good. This one comes from DB Witt 2011. Slammin' Saturday Satisfaction, 5 stars. If you're looking for the working man's NBA podcast, look no further than the Saturday Slam and Jam. You might be flipping your flapjacks while you listen, but there will be no flat pancake takes on this show. After a long week at the factory or in the mines, unwind in the ambience of Andrew's reasoned opinions. Treat yourself to the tranquil sounds of Mr. Baby Cake's trivia voice. Let your worries melt away like butter on hotcakes while Andrew and Al break down the toughest NBA topics with Apalm. Whether you are a casual fan or an NBA sicko, this pod is sure to leave you satisfied and smiling. Thank you so much for that one. And then one more from T.colon FYL, IO7CB8H/:Y8U98. Oh, 5 stars. Love the Slam and Jam. Who else could fill an entire lineup with Steven Adams All-Stars? Great stuff. Thanks so much for listening to this week's
Andrew,
episode.
Before we go,
yeah. What's up?
This Wheel of Fandom week is incredible. This is the first week we've ever had where we theoretically wouldn't need to own League Pass to watch every single
No kidding.
game. 4 national TV games for the Grizzlies in a row at Denver, at the Clippers, at the Lakers, and Golden State at home.
Wow.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. I'll take that every single week. Wow. The wheel has done us right again, Al.
It's amazing.
This is great. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy your weekend and the basketball, and we'll talk to you guys again next week.